Well, good morning, everyone, and hope you are having a good start to Thanksgiving weekend, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. And for those who watch this down in the States, Canadians have a different date for Thanksgiving, and it's tomorrow. Anyway, they like to celebrate closer to the harvest time. It's much more of a farmer's kind of celebration, I think. And anyway, let's get to the scriptures. We're looking at Luke's gospel still, and Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, and we find him in a place where he's kind of in the middle of nowhere. He's on the boundary between the area of Galilee, which is on the west side of the Sea of Galilee up there, and the area of Samaria, which is right at the bottom of the Sea of Galilee, and Judea. Where Jerusalem and all that is in southern Israel. And it's a place that's just rife with better way of saying it than prejudice. The Judeans were prejudiced against the Galileans and the Samaritans. There's a bit of racism that falls into it as well. But it's just a place right in the middle of nowhere. And something kind of significant happens here. Jesus is met by a colony of lepers who were outcast, sent out to live in the middle of nowhere because of their leprosy, the disease. Jesus heals them, and oddly, only one of them comes back to thank him. And since it's Thanksgiving, maybe we ought to talk about a little bit of thankfulness in a way or two. Anyway, let me read this to you. It's Luke chapter 17. Verses 11 to 19. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. And he prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. He was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." Word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, I'm a bit perplexed. Why does being thankful appear to be such a difficult thing? Apparently being awful comes much easier to us, but we've all seemed to have forgotten that the basic meaning of the word awful is to be filled with awe, with reverence. Instead, feeling awful is feeling absolutely terrible for us. Feeling awful includes a lot of not good feelings, shame, guilt, dysphoria, anxiety, anger, bitterness, feeling loathsome and lonesome and unlovable. And I could go on. And I think we've probably all had our share of feeling awful. Interestingly, in the current world of mental health, the cure for feeling awful is what they call being mindful. And what they mean by that is sit still, breathe deep, relax. And if you can't relax, then start tensing your muscles, beginning with your toes, and do your whole body, every muscle group. Work your way all the way up to your face and the top of your head. This is good yoga stuff if you're having a panic attack. It'll help. And as you relax, listen to the sounds around you. Smell the smells. Touch something to feel its texture. Look look at something and notice its details. Then take time to note your feelings and name them. Don't ask why you feel them, for that will spiral you out of mindfulness back into your prior state. Just name them and take note of your body and how you feel those awful feelings in particular areas in your body. Like, is it hard to swallow, or are your hands sweating, or do you feel nauseous? And don't judge yourselves for having these unpleasant thoughts and feelings. We're humans in a messed up world. Everybody gets them. Instead, just pretend you are the best, most unconditionally loving friend you could possibly have, and say to yourself what that friend would say to you. Well, that's being mindful and learning how to be nice to yourself. I think maybe even me just telling you about this practice should have made you feel a bit more relaxed. Now, it may be that I'm not as well read as I should be, but I don't hear so much anymore, particularly here in the wake of COVID, about being thankful. And I think the reason for not hearing about being thankful much anymore is that it may be that to most of us, or most people today, in the wake of environmental disasters, wars, refugee crises, pandemics, economic worries, the list could go on. People are having a difficult time stomaching the thought that there even is a God, especially one who is personally loving. In order to be thankful, one must have a power higher than oneself, to use the words of AA here. You need a higher power to be thankful to. Unfortunately, we live in a day when we need God to be God. If there is a God out there, but God just seems to be letting things run their courses, so that a sense of hopelessness is the true pandemic that we're up against. We don't see ourselves as being responsible for the ills in which we live. Instead, we blame other people, blame the rich, blame the pharmaceuticals, blame whoever. And we blame God for just letting all this happen. But after a while, we realize blaming doesn't cure the despair, the hopelessness that we feel. And so a lot of people are turning to their self now, looking to their self and how to make myself feel good in this hopeless world, because this despair, it sucks. Well, this is a particularly hard time to live in if you're somebody who truly feels awful. The world will tell you there is no God, so cure your own awfulness by self-soothing and doing what's best for you. Be self-minded instead of other-minded, instead of neighbor-minded. But unfortunately, this self-minded approach seems to devolve into narcissism, and that narcissism is reinforced by a wealth of feel-good brain chemicals that makes one feel happy when your life is really a mess. It's the mindful practice of being mindful. It releases chemicals in your brain that make you feel better. I might be sounding negative and critical of what a lot of people are finding helpful, indeed life-changing. But I'll just say that I am all for self-awareness and self-acceptance, knowing who I am and how I affect other people, and changing those things about myself by which I hurt myself and others. Those skills make one functional in relationship. They help you to be other-minded. Self-mindedness breeds dysfunction in relationships and usually leaves a world of hurt in its wake. I might be old school, but I think the cure for feeling awful comes from outside oneself and is discovered in a relationship with God and made real in our relationship with others. It is knowing oneself to be beloved by God, a beloved child of God who actually does, a God who actually does care about everything and about us each, and a God who can actually heal those overwhelming feelings of awfulness. Turning to God and being worshipful or awestruck and thankful is crucial, I think, to wholeness for us human beings whom God created to enjoy Him, to enjoy life, to enjoy each other, and to enjoy ourselves. Well, let me tell you about some lepers here, because I think these lepers in our reading today can help us see this. Life as a leper in Bible times was horrible. I think it kind of went beyond being awful. It was horrible. If you have ever had the pervasively wicked feeling of, there's something wrong with me, that separated you, made you feel cut off from other people, well, then welcome to the world of the leper. Leprosy was a very misunderstood skin disease, which back in the day, and it made a person look like they were the walking dead. There were skin lesions, your fingers and your hands and so forth would start to rot. Skin would be flaky, your facial features would begin to form because of swelling in your skin. Now, a person literally looked like they were rotting away and in death. The disease was believed to be a curse on a person because of that reason, because it looked so much like death, and they felt the curse came about because of secret sins. You did something that you needed to own up to, but you aren't. And since they looked like death, they were not allowed to come to the temple to be in the presence of the God who gives life, so they were cut off from God. They also knew that the disease was contagious, and so lepers were made to live away from people, and usually they formed their own colonies because they needed each other. There was a religious term for the state of being cut off from the presence of God and from other people. It was the word unclean. Lepers were unclean. There was something wrong about them, and so they were shamed and felt ashamed. They were unclean. Well, Jesus and his disciples are out in the middle of nowhere here, and when a colony of 10 lepers approach him, wanting him to show them mercy, wanting him to do what only God could do for them, to do that one thing that would make life right for them, heal them. They come to him, and interestingly, Jesus doesn't do anything to heal them, like touch them as he had done with other lepers. He simply tells them to go, start living the way you would if you were healed. For a leper, the first thing you had to do if you are healed of your leprosy is go see the priest, who would pronounce you clean so that you could return to life and community and come before God at the temple. If you want to live, then quit acting like lepers and get on with living. Well, that's what they did. They took those first few steps of living life as if they were clean. They were made clean. They were healed. In taking those first few steps of faithfulness to Jesus, to doing as he asked, they became clean. There was no reason anymore for them to feel shame or be cut off from the presence of God and from other people, or from full participation in human community. They were healed. They were clean. Well, one of the lepers, upon realizing he was now healed, began to praise God loudly, and he turned around to go back to Jesus, and he threw himself on the ground at Jesus' feet and began to thank him. In those first few steps of faithfulness to Jesus, of turning to God for healing, this leper found his awfulness transformed into worshipfulness and thankfulness. In his encounter with Jesus, he discovered that there is a God who does care about him, and that there was nothing, not even leprosy, that could separate him from God's love and healing mercy that can be found in living according to the Jesus way. Well, when I hear what happens next after the leper came back to thank Jesus, I'm a bit shocked by Jesus' response. Since only one of them came back, Jesus is wondering what happened to the other 9 lepers. Weren't they healed too? He had made them clean. What happened to them? I wonder too. Did they go on to live the healed life? Did they not realize they were clean? Did they even go to the priest? Why were they not so moved to worship and thankfulness as this one leper was? I think it was that they didn't realize that Jesus was God with them. God is at work in the life of everybody for healing. And yet we don't take time to notice, to turn around and worship, give thanks. We don't recognize God in our midst. And all the while we continue on wondering why God has seemingly abdicated. We don't see God's work because we are happier to depersonalize God and blame God for all that's wrong, while we ourselves, we don't pray, we don't crack a Bible expecting God to speak to us, and we will rather willingly take the route of self-mindedness. Well, Jesus says to the man who came back in worship to thank him. He tells him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faithfulness has made you well." Saved you is what it says in the Greek. This man's loyalty to Jesus, expressed in his doing what Jesus said to do to be healed and then returning in worship to thank him, removed the awfulness of life that he experienced as a leper. He's saved, whole. Well, I know I'm just a voice out in the wilderness, but I'm one of those people who has lived with that profound sense of there's something wrong with me. I know the dark world of addiction, and Jesus healed me of it. My days begin and end with turning to God worshipfully, and I do better when I add thankfulness to that mix. I've tried being mindful, but I prefer praying, especially when praying is screaming at God in lament. 70% of the Psalms are laments. Why, God? Where are you? I find that even when I scream at God and lament, God makes his presence felt. He lets us know that he hears us, and he communicates back to us. He truly does. And knowing yourself to be a beloved child of God, and that your life is in the hands of one who loves you enough to die for you, goes a long way in this world of uncertainties. I, like every one of you, would like to see God at this moment step up and be God and do what God does. Heal, restore, resurrect. But now is not God's time to do what he's going to do. But rather now is our time to turn back and be thankful and be mindful not so much of ourselves, but more so of his presence with us. Take time to remember how he's been faithful to us in the past, and give thanks especially for the people he's put in our lives, our spouses, our children, our parents, our friends. Turn back to Jesus and be thankful. There is nothing that can separate us from the love of God present with us in Jesus. Be mindful of his presence with you. Turn around. Be thankful. Amen. Well, since it's Thanksgiving, let's listen to one of those great Thanksgiving hymns, For the Fruits of All Creation. Let us sing and have a good week.